All right. Now I can speak at a less loud tone. I'm calling this meeting of the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council to order. My name is Molly Moran Ogren. I have the honor of serving as the chair of this council on behalf of our IDEM Director, Terrence Gray. We have a quorum. We have an agenda. Are there any recommended changes to that agenda? All right, hearing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda as presented? Hearing none, the agenda is approved by consent. The next item is the meeting minutes from March 4th, 2024. Are there any recommended changes to the minutes as noted? No. Is there any objection to approving the minutes by consent? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment on any matters not included on tonight's agenda. If so, I'll raise your hand in the auditorium first. Okay, any on Zoom? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll move on to the next items. I just have a couple things about procedure tonight for tonight's items. The next items we have on the agenda are proposed amendments that were posted for public notice and heard on Wednesday, February 28th, and closed on March 17th, 2024. The best way to proceed for these items that have already been publicly noticed, we will have the Division of Marine Fisheries present the proposed changes and weigh in on the impact of those changes. The council will then be afforded time for questions and commentary, and then I will look to the council for a motion on each item in the form of a recommendation to the Rhode Island DEM director. Since these have already been heard and responded to through public comment, the council will not take input from the public tonight unless any member of the council wishes to incorporate any additional comments from the public. However, these comments will be limited to nuance or items that haven't already been discussed through the record. So this should only reflect notions that are outside of previous testimony. I will only take one proposal in favor and one against because we have a pretty stacked agenda. If you have already sent in written comment or spoke at the public hearing, you should not repeat it here. It's already in record. All right, with that being said, we're gonna go to the first item, recreational striped bass filling.
Sure, thanks, Madam Chair. So this one is a recreational filleting rule that we're looking to propagate. We want to be consistent with Addendum 2 to Amendment 7 of the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for Atlantic striped bass. The summary of the rule is: first, racks must be retained and must be kept whole, meaning head, tail, and body remain intact. No striped bass shall be mutilated in any manner that prevents accurate measurement. No more than 2 fillets taken from legal striped bass, the equivalent of 1 fish per angler. And so this next one, we actually got some comments from industry and some Division of Law Enforcement feedback, and it has been changed to be similar to the shore-based rule, which says no possession of racks or fillets while actively fishing with lines in the water. That's a change there. And then for each of the 3 modes, we have private wreck vessels. Racks must be retained until the vessel is secured to a dock or removed from the water, and all fillets have been offloaded from the vessel. For party charter for hire vessels, racks must be retained until the vessel is secured to a dock or removed from the water, and all paying passengers have disembarked the vessel, and all fillets have been offloaded from the vessel. And for shore-based anglers, no filleting of striped bass will be permitted while still actively fishing with lines in the water.
Good. All right, I will go to the division for land.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The division supports the proposed language as outlined from Addendum 2 to Amendment 7. And we also support the revision that we had heard from workshop, but then also reinforced when in discussions with the Division of Law Enforcement. Generally speaking, there's been discussions about racks and how to dispose of them, and I think at this point, much of our belief is, and position is that, given the variability in locations, private, publicly owned access points and marinas, a lot of that, at this point in time, is gonna be related to the specific rules of each individual, location, but, as things develop this summer and we see how things work under the new rule, then, we will work as we can, with the industry thereafter to address their challenges.
Is there any commentary from the council? Go ahead, Ann.
I've got a problem with, I'm docking galleries, so, state owned and. Dan did say that they were gonna put barrels or some kind of receptacles in the dock for the rats, which is not a very healthy situation. I don't know if anybody remembers, but years ago, we used to have dumpsters there. And all they did was brought rats and seagulls, and it was a total mess. And then, we kind of solved the problem a little bit by, we, sold the frames at the dock to, Spanish people or whatever, and, everything was good. It was all used, and then, the health department put a stop to that. Because they said you can't sell anything unless it was wide and things like that. So, now you're gonna put a receptacle at the end of the dock, you're gonna throw the striped bass frames in there. And all these people are gonna be back taking them out of there, so it's gonna be a disaster. I think it's gotta be addressed somehow, that situation doesn't occur again. I like the fact that, no consumption of fillets or whatever while fishing. I agree with that 100%. But I still like to see some kind of a better way of disposing of these things. Can't leave them on the boat. It's just not a healthy thing, not a healthy situation. And you can't put them in barrels on the end of the docks, because you're gonna have people crawling through them and stuff, and then they're gonna throw them stuff they don't want. Garbage are gonna be in those. It's not gonna be just the frames, it's gonna be a mess. So it's gotta be addressed.
I will just offer that the policy being examined at the port is separate from the language here, just for everyone's awareness, just to kind of
Right.
bifurcate the two. But I think your commentary is valid. Is Dan on today? Okay. So I think it's a good note to have. Is there any commentary or discussion point from the division on that matter? Or law enforcement?
I'll start and then I'll pass to law enforcement. I mean, the problem's pervasive throughout the state.
Right.
And I think that we've kind of evaluated the different rules the different scenarios, right? Private marinas, public access points, various shorelines. We understand it will be challenging. We also understand that this has been pretty common practice, or it's been in regulation for other states already to some degree, with varied success, I guess. So in the absence of having a system now where every access point and every marina and every dock has a state supported receptacle or some type of way of disposal, I'm not sure that we have a better solution at this point of how to dispose of the racks besides various removal at a later date, the next day or something.
I have to do something like they do with medical waste, where you can put it in there, but you can't get in there to get it out.
Yeah, I mean, the division can chat with or speak with coastal and other marina managers towards finding solutions, but there isn't a bulletproof mechanism that we have across all locations at this point. I don't know if enforcement has another perspective from a legal perspective or a regulatory perspective, but.
Our position is that the disposal of racks at the Port of Galilee and state-owned piers and docks, including Pier 9, would be prohibited. Outside of those areas, we will not be enforcing the disposal of racks in open water. It's been a practice in the past. So I believe part of the intention of the proposal that came up at a workshop which is highlighted in red here, was to allow for charter boats to dispose of wracks on their way out to go fishing again.
So you're saying that they will remain on the boat overnight?
Until the next trip. That's up to you. You can dispose of it in any manner you want, but.
It's gonna be a problem, I can see it.
Andy, was there any further commentary on the language or text over here? This one? Okay. So it's definitely been noted in the record though, so that we can address it postal.
And he did join if you want to ask him.
Yeah, so, let me think my question really quick. So Dan, we had the chief of coastal, is Dan Costa. Dan, there was a question from Andy D'Angelo about the policy about putting barrels at the end of the piers to collect wraps. And had some concern about people collecting them or collecting from them, smell and nuisance and rats and pests. So I just wanted to offer an opportunity if you wanted to weigh in on that policy that was being discussed. Did I capture that?
If the answer is yes, I'm asking you to unmute on the webinar.
I think for the sake of transparency and keeping this meeting moving along, let's make sure that that's a nice sidebar. Andy with our chief of postal, Dan Costa. Okay, is there any other further commentary or questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion on this proposal.
Well, yeah, motion to adopt the new language here for the fillet law.
Motion to adopt the language as amended.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rice.
Before we vote, can I just
Yeah. I'll let Nicole get the motion up real quick. So, in the interest of commentary or questions on the motion at hand, Mr. Betsy?
So, I'm gonna support this when the vote comes up, but I'd like to see the state consider a certification program for head boats so that they could, exempt is the wrong word, but so essentially so that they would be allowed to dispose of their wracks at sea, providing they've been certified and no violations, associated, and that would be for the state, for state head boats. I'd like to see something like that. I've been in other states where no other group can, like, I know this is new to Rhode Island, but there's plenty of states where you can't fly anything at sea. You have to be able to show everything, but the one exception usually are head boats, and as long as they can fly. So,
It's not FMP compliant. The FMP was specific that racks had to be retained and it didn't provide any exceptions to that particular mode.
if Rhode Island could push for it, that would be something to consider. We could see it.
Great comment. Ms. Nicole. Is there any other commentary? Otherwise, we can go for the vote. All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the striped bass recreational fillet requirements with the proposed revision, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor, 1, all those opposed? 1 opposed. Motion passes. Okay, and we're gonna go on to the next item, which is the commercial general category striped bass management.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what we have here are 3 industry proposals to set the commercial general category striped bass season. The first 2 would have 1 period which would have all of the allocations in it. The first one starting a little earlier, June 11th. The second one starting later on July 9th. And then the third proposal would split the allocation into 2 periods, beginning on June 11th, and then fishing for 6 days, or when 50% of the quota had been reached. Then the next period would start on July 9th, with the remaining 50% of the quota. So the next proposal would be in place for any of the last 3 you saw. And this would concern just the timing of when people can possess and sell striped bass. Currently, we have it on, the day it opens at midnight. This proposal would change the possession rules to allow for possession of striped bass between 8 p.m. on Monday through 8 p.m. on Thursday of each week when the fisheries open. But possession would be prohibited at all other times. The sale would be modified to allow sales starting at 12 a.m. on Tuesday and going through 8 p.m. of Thursday each week when the fisheries open. So once again, this is separate from the other 3. It could go with the other 3, or it doesn't have to.
Great. I'll go for any questions before I go to the council or go to the division.
I have a question. Maybe choose like the chat. Sure. So my question would be if you're allowed to possess at 8 p.m. on Monday, does the next 24-hour period, so are you allowed to possess another 5 at 8:01 p.m. on Tuesday? Is that how it's written? Are we changing what a day is?
So I'll go to the division.
The idea would be, in theory, that you would not be able to land and then possess them the same day, as I interpret it. I think that would be a stipulation of this, although I think that poses additional challenges.
So if you land, back at the dock at 10 a.m. on Tuesday to sell, and you go back out fishing, you are not allowed to land until midnight, 12:01 Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, that's my impression of the motion, but, yeah, John, if you have any further thoughts, John?
No, I agree. I think the intent here is to allow people to get out early on the Monday. They still couldn't land and sell it until Tuesday. So you're landing it on Tuesday, so that's your day. You can't land again until Wednesday. So you could go out early in the morning on Tuesday or get a jump on it Monday night. Either way, you can only land one time during the periods that are open. So you get one landing Tuesday. Doesn't matter if you caught it Tuesday morning or Monday night. So.
Does that answer? Yeah, it makes me question, what the day is. Now that it's changed.
I might go to the division for additional perspective. Really quick.
Sure, I think I'll kind of speak to them in 2 sets. So for the proposals 1, 2, 3, the division doesn't have a strong preference. As you can see, the design is to try and use different periods. The first 2 moves away from this split allocation in sub periods and effectively letting the fishery run. And then the proposal 3 is more of our traditional model. I think what it strives to do, though, is have a more predictable first opening for the first 6/11 through 6/20. It was discussed at the hearing a bit about where the 50 came from and such. The goal really was to try and have a backstop on the allocation. So, for example, if not all the quotas used in that 6/11 to 6/20 period, it would roll to the next, but this way, that 6/11, 6/20 period doesn't eat up too much of the second, of too much of the fish to then prevent a substantive second period. So that's the ultimate makeup for these. For the second proposal, the division has some concerns about the ability for this to perhaps exhaust quota faster in some ways. And there's a little bit of a challenge is that conceivably in some periods that this might actually allow for preference over a nighttime fishery versus a morning fishery, more so quota utilization questions, conceivably fish will be landed a lot, fish will be landed earlier. So it's more of a quota utilization perspective, although, the main push for this is to get out there earlier, get fish, transit while it's light, get the fish earlier, but that also then comes with potentially using the quota faster. I'll let enforcement speak to other concerns about or other considerations for the rule, but I will just note that recently we've heard this proposal in concept a few years in a row now from Massachusetts, from our industry, with the notion that Massachusetts also has this rule, or that they've been looking to do this rule. They don't have this on the books, and they also reviewed it this season and did not put it into effect, primarily because of the same questions and confusion that's being faced of how do you call a day a day, can you land and possess and double on the same day, as well as, there's mixed feelings from dealers as to whether they would prefer the fish really, really early in the morning, like 12:01, versus whether they would want the fish at 10 a.m. That's a different state with different dealers, but that's just the discussion there, and I wanted to just help provide a consistent message of what may or may not be happening in Massachusetts. I don't know if enforcement has anything else they want to share.
Yeah, I can add that we're not wholeheartedly opposed to this. It's one less day that we have to patrol from 8 p.m. into midnight to make sure people aren't fishing early. However, I do think it greatly complicates the regulation. I can see a lot of people having the same question that Katie did, and that message getting out to all the commercial fishermen that if you land Monday morning, you still cannot fish. But sorry, if you land Tuesday morning, you can't fish again until Wednesday. I see that as a complicated factor. I mean, we're essentially redefining a day for one species of fish only in the commercial industries.
So I might clarify as well, just on how this rule is noticed, just so that our council members know their options. So, Nicole, would you mind going back to the first one? So you have these three proposals. Okay, and then each one comes with the associated language on the second slide with it. So it's proposal 1 with this language, proposal 2 with this language, and proposal 3 with this language. So you can make your choices accordingly between those two slides. So I might offer if there's any further questions or commentary from the council, just a quick second.
So once one makes the motion, with proposal 1 and including the additional proposals.
So the question was, if somebody makes a proposal, it would be a proposal and the proposed rule. As the motion maker, you're entitled to make whatever motions you want to make. So if you would like one proposal with or without elements, you can choose to make that motion. But I will need one. And
I'll make a motion. Most of the people I talk to are looking for proposal 3. So I'm making a motion to go with proposal 3. And I think there was a lot of people, they wanted this also. So I'll make that in the motion.
proposal 3 as noticed with this language. Okay. Andy D'Angelo proposing proposal 3 with the additional proposed rules. Do I have a second? seconded by Mr. Trousdale. Ms. Nicole, second. Is there any commentary or questions from the council on this matter, on the motion before us? Is that correct, Andy? Connor?
Just echoing general concerns again about that messaging as well as port utilization. If the council still, would like to move forward, I would suggest that the council revisit how that worked in this season. I think if there are challenges with it, and it would be worth evaluating further if you so choose to do that. But again, it will make the management in season investing a little bit more challenging for us, and for a fishery that we don't seem to have a challenge of using the quota on already. So
I was gonna say before we vote. Other than working on, like we did with proposal 3 to split out the season a little bit. It seems like it's working really well. We've always met the quota. We haven't had huge overages or underages. So, I would be a little hesitant to support the change in the language, for that reason in terms of defining what a day is. I get that there's commercial guys that like to get out early and I understand that, but it seems like we would be doing a lot of work to fix something and I'm not sure is that wrong.
I feel the same way as Craig. I think proposal 3 is, I support proposal 3, but I do have my concerns about the opening, just because there is no problem getting this quota. There's always concern about overage, especially in this fishery. I can't support it with the additional language.
Jared? Yeah, go ahead.
So if we voted against this, we could bring it back without that additional language.
As a matter of procedure, you have two options. You could be ready for the question, and I can ask you the question and you can vote on it and risk it either passing or failing, and then I would have to entertain another motion. Or I could also entertain a proposed amendment to the motion, amending the motion to remove the additional language, the additional proposed language. Just one second. And you can vote on amending it, and if the amendment passes, the motion would be as amended. If the motion does not pass to amend it, then you still have this language like before you, and then you would have to vote on this language. So I know it seems a little hairy, but I'll reiterate one more time. I don't want to belabor it too much, but it's important that you have the option to vote now on the language before you, or you have somebody, or you could entertain, I could entertain a motion to amend this motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the motion by striking the language regarding possession permitted for sale. The additional language. So just so that reads essentially adoption of proposal 3.
Okay, Meg Rice makes a motion to amend the motion. It's seconded by Rick Vesky. Okay, is there any further commentary? Are you guys ready to vote on whether to amend the motion to strike the language, the additional proposed language from the motion? Yeah, okay. All those in favor of striking the additional proposed language regarding possession permitted and sale permitted for 2024 commercial general category strike estimate, please raise your hand. All right, in favor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all unanimous. So the motion is amended, not passes. Was it unanimous? Yes. It was unanimous, okay? So,
So it is,
6-1, 6-0.
it's option 3 without the added language.
so the motion as amended is to recommend to the director proposal 3.
Right.
That's just it, that's the recommendation. Okay, so I'll give Nicole a hot second.
Makes it less complicated.
I believe that's where we are. Okay, is there any additional commentary or questions before I ask the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 3 as noticed for 2024 commercial general category striped bass management as amended, please raise your hand. 5, 6, 7. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. You gotta learn how to count. Okay, we're going on to the next item, which is striped bass floating fish trap reporting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first of 2 floating fish trap proposals. The first one is some housekeeping. Last year, we updated our dealer rules to require striped bass reporting within 24 hours after landing. There's also a reporting requirement in Part 3 for floating fish trap operators, which we are proposing to update at this time. Similarly, we will require that reporting occur no more than 24 hours after the landing.
If there's no questions, I'll go to the division for their perspective.
Support the proposal.
Is there any questions or commentary? I could entertain a motion if we're going to go that quick.
I'll make a motion. To recommend adoption of the.
So Katie Egan recommends to adopt the rule as proposed. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Barrett. Any questions or commentary? Are there division perspective? Are you guys ready for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the commercial floating fish trap striped bass reporting requirements as noticed, please raise your hand. 6, 3, unanimous vote passes. Okay, moving on to commercial striped bass floating fish trap management.
So this is an industry proposal which would modify the trigger for when the possession limit of striped bass and floating fish trappers reduced from unlimited to 500 pounds per licensee per day. The threshold would change from 70% of the quota to 90%.
If there's no initial questions or commentary from the council, I'll go to the division for their perspective.
There isn't a strong preference from the division on this. By way of background, the trigger was helpful in the past when there was many fish trap operators harvesting striped bass. As the number has been reduced, has reduced or been lowered over time, there's a perceived less of a need to actually have that trigger at 70, and it would then allow for, I guess, those proposing it to continue to fish at the presumed higher possession limit up until the trigger. I think this comes down to business model. As you probably saw in your packet, there's support for it against this, as each operator has different needs in terms of what type of catch they would need to actually go out and fish on a given day. So the spirit of this motion is to try and allow for getting closer to that trigger and utilizing fish at a higher rate. But it's particularly a business model question, not so much quota management. We should be able to manage either of the options, the status quo or this. We work quite closely with the fish trap operators and monitoring the quota in season, so we would continue to do so either way.
Is there any further commentary from the council?
I would think by going to 90, it might some days help reduce bycatch. We're at 70% and they can have 500 and they get 600 pounds. There's 100 going over the side. If we don't do that till 90, I would think that even though the quota remains the same, it might cut down on bycatch a bit. So, or bycatch might be the wrong word because it would be straight bass, but unutilizable fish.
I do want to recognize that there were 2 public comments they would like to see it stay at 70%. And I understand there are many active floating fish trap operations, licenses. And I thought maybe a good compromise would be to go to 80%, as a trigger. I don't, so.
If there's no other thoughts on that matter. Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt proposal 1, but with 80%.
Second.
Motion to adopt proposal 1, but amend to 80% as the trigger, seconded by Mr. McRae. Is there any commentary or division proposal or division comment? Let's try that again. Is there any council commentary first? Is there any division perspective?
I think, you can always evaluate and then revisit next year. I think both within that regulation, there's also the possession limit component too. So if the trigger percent is, works or not, but the possession limit, once you hit that trigger limit, can also, there's just different methods you can use to achieve the goal. Again, I won't speak for either or any of the businesses and what's best for their business model, but there's a couple ways to perhaps utilize the fish in an efficient manner as you get towards the end of the season.
Great. Is there any, are you guys ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director adoption of proposal 1 with an 80% trigger for 2024 commercial floating fish trap strike bass management, please raise your hand. It is unanimously passed. Okay, we're gonna move on to commercial striped bass tagging for the dealer.
Sure, so for this one, we are clarifying when striped bass must be tagged. All striped bass that are sold must have a dealer, commercial dealer tag affixed to it. Here we're going into part 3 and part 7, both the sections that have the tagging requirements and making it clear that striped bass shall be tagged at the point of sale. Just to clarify crystal clear when the bass has to be tagged.
Does the division want to weigh in on perspective?
No further comment. Pretty self-explanatory.
Any law enforcement perspective? Is there any questions or commentary from the council? Otherwise, I can entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the division proposal.
Motion to accept proposal 1 by Mr. Bethany,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Barrow. Any further commentary? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of language as noticed for commercial striped bass dealer tagging, please raise your hand. The motion passes unanimously. Finally got that statement correct. Okay, we're gonna move on to Menhaden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have 3 proposals here for commercial Menhaden management. The first one is a division proposal which clarifies language in several sections. No regulatory changes proposed. The second one is the next 2 are industry proposals. The first would move the Sakonnet River boundary of the Menhaden management area for the fall opening, that is from September 1st on, from the south, from basically from Fogland to Sandy Point to south of the Sakonnet Bridge. So basically open up the whole Sakonnet River. It also proposes to increase the possession limit for the September 1 fall opening, increasing from 25,000 pounds to 120,000 pounds per vessel day. Proposal 3 is a different proposal from industry, which would establish a weekly possession limit in the Menhaden management area, regardless of whether the Menhaden management area is open or closed. The seasons would be from April 1st to May 31st and September 1st to the end of the year, or until the quota is exhausted. And it would allow for 25,000 pounds per vessel per week to be removed on any days except Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And just real quick, there was a little confusion in the public comments about proposal 1. So proposal 1 is just the division clarifying our language. A lot of people thought of that as status quo. Status quo is always an option. We just don't notice it because it's the current rules. Proposal 1 could go with the industry proposals or without. They are just language changes. Next slide. So proposal 3, you've actually seen a similar version before last year. It was a little higher possession limit. It was 120,000 pounds per vessel week, regardless of MMA status. We were asked to go back by our director to do some review before this year. So first off, we were asked to see if the potential change of Menhaden management was compliant with the fishery management plan. It is. Second was to develop some analysis to project various scenarios of how the change would play out with existing management. So we do have that on the next slide. And third was to coordinate with the Division of Law Enforcement to see how this would work as far as their enforcement of the rule. So it would pose a challenge in that vessels that go after Menhaden commercially have their holds certified for the 120,000 pound possession limit. You can go in, see if they're full, that's 120,000 pounds. So that'd be a little bit of a challenge trying to estimate where the 25,000 pounds came out. It was suggested that part of the rule would include that the fish be stored in a standard barrel or X-tote, which we have a rough estimate of what that weight would be. Next slide. So here for Ask 2, we did go through some model runs under various scenarios you'll see, and played with when the season would open, how many weekly limits were taken out, to see how that would affect basically the days open and the landing cap. And the analysis showed that it could decrease the biomass available for the Menhaden management area to open, which would result in a decrease in the number of fishing days and or a decrease in the landing cap or the amount available to be harvested.
That was a lot, so I'll offer a minute for questions from the council, otherwise I can go directly into the division perspective. All right, so over to you, Connor.
Thank you. So, as John noted, these are somewhat like a la carte options. You can, they're different proposals, but they could be additive depending on how you want to think about it. Proposal 1, division supports clarifying the language. For proposal 2, these were some carryovers that were discussed last year that we wanted to just bring back forth, and when reevaluating these elements, overall the division is not particularly supportive of these, particularly element 1, the Sandy Point the Bogland Sandy Point boundary was explicitly picked because of the user conflict challenges in the northern part of the Sakana River, things like other commercial fisheries, recreational fisheries, and other stakeholder use. So, and that it's our perspective that hasn't changed substantively or decreased anyway to allow to support that. And I think from the proposal 3 perspective, given the potential for the harvest to actually exhaust the quota or exhaust the fish before the MMA actually opens up. The division has concern with that. Furthermore, the idea that for effort, it's a bit unclear like what we might get for introduced effort from the area. So it's hard for us to model, or guess, but particularly if there's out-of-state effort interested that earlier in the season, or new industry members, entering this fishery with, assuming they're inspected and such, that would probably pose a challenge for the ability for the MMA to ever actually open. Again, it's hard to know, it's super variable in terms of whether the fish show up or not from year to year. When running the projections based on the last big year we had in 2021, it would indicate that using such a program with a modest level of participation would impact the directed fishery that we've historically had. And, I think that concern was apparent in the comments made in your e-packet.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, sorry, one last question, comment too, my apologies. I think there's another element of trying to find a balance between small scale bait supply and fisheries and a larger 120,000 pound possession limit. So, I think it would probably help to the council discuss a little bit about what kind of goals they see for Rhode Island and trying to get bait to people, is it something, is there something, is it truly 25,000 pounds per week? And is there an interest in trying to figure out the challenge of enforcing that and watching that, or following that catch? Or is there something of smaller scale that would better meet the needs of local businesses and such? So just food for thought, because we've gotten various comments from large scale to medium scale to small scale. And it seems like all the different businesses have different needs, ranging from 6,000 pounds a week to 120,000 pounds a day. So just thought maybe, during your deliberations, it might be helpful to discuss that. Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. Go ahead, Dave.
Great, thanks. I just, a couple of questions. So a lot of the comments were about, leaving Menhaden as forage for the birds and other species. Is that already considered when Menhaden quotas are set? Like for Atlantic herring, they set some aside for the ecosystem before they make fishery quotas. Is Menhaden the same way?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go coastwide and then to Rhode Island. So right now, ASMFC manages Menhaden through the Interstate Fisheries Management Board. They set both ecological reference points, so to understand the stock status of Menhaden, to make sure there's enough fish in the ocean for striped bass and other predators. And then we also discuss it when setting the total allowable catch. So we can modify the TAC based on, what reference points say we are at, or we can be more conservative with that. So I would argue that there's an element through all of those, where the ecosystem is being considered. I think the question here more speaks to not coastwide though in the bay. It's really about leaving enough fish in the bay for things like striped bass here, bluefish, bluefin tuna, the false albacore, the things that are coming, and chasing into coastal waters or up into the upper parts of Narragansett Bay. So, in terms of Narragansett Bay, quasi ecosystem based fisheries management plan, I think that's effectively what the area is founded on, with trying to, historically find compromise between, those different elements. And that's where the cash cap and the actual flyover surveys originated from. Again, that was a pretty lengthy process that we engaged with the commission, state rec, commercial harvesters, conservationists, academics, and so on. So I think there are things for Menhaden, regionally or coastwide that are already trying to work toward the ecosystem considerations. I guess the question is, do you want to modify the ecosystem considerations here in Narragansett Bay? We do have a large quota, because Menhaden's done pretty well in the past. That's largely driven by, a northward shift in Menhaden, or really an increase in the overall biomass in recent years, and then quota reallocation. Again, we're a boom and bust type of fishery here. Some years we have very little landings because either area closure or the fish don't show up. And in other areas, And then in other years, like 2021, under this current management plan, we fished about 150% of our quota by getting transfers. So, hopefully that helps.
I guess my other question unrelated, this additional considerations that were in the packet from the division. Seems like it's pushing to make the proposal 3 like a pilot plan, or can you explain more about where those came from? They really, I don't see them in the hearing, around like discussed. It seems like between the hearing, they're put in the packet. And now we're being asked to consider putting those parameters into proposal 3.
Well, I think ultimately there were folks that were of the notion, like, if we were to accept any modified proposal 3, that let's just see how it works for a year. I think that's the idea, is that the idea of pilot allows, I guess, increased comfort to see how it works, and then we can always revisit it. Conceivably, with regulations, we can revisit them annually anyway. So I guess the pilot would just mean that if you were to modify it, you would basically, to a pilot, I would suggest that putting in a sunset date to force it to exit, if that's what you wanted to do. I don't know if I would recommend the pilot, because, you know, ultimately you'll want to really think through all the different parameters of what is entailed in a pilot. You know, do you want to control dates? Do you want to control participation? Do you want to control, you know, various other elements? Also, in the past, we've had, you know, a lot of the pilots we've had have included people registering ahead of time and having VMS and all these other requirements that weren't further consideration, both on the division side and for the stakeholders. So I'm not sure I would necessarily put forth a pilot, so to speak, because again, you can always revisit the language the following year, but it may make sense to further discuss, you know, what are the actual goals, I guess. What does the council perceive as the goals for modifying the area? You know, is 25,000 pounds per vessel per week meeting those goals? Is it not? So.
Is there any further commentary or discussion on this matter?
I guess all I want to say is, I absolutely want to have small scale Menhaden poking fishing in the bay for local fishermen to catch local bait. It just seems logical in every way, because, I mean, people have been doing it. Let's legitimize the guys who are doing it, and I don't want to see a pilot program. I don't want to see people being required VMS. I don't want to lose this. Like last year, we voted, I think unanimously, to recommend to the director opening up the area. So I don't want this to go away, but I think as written up there, it's very hard to support it. And after reading all the comments from all these Audubon and all the other people, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think we need to maybe try to recommend having some type of a program, maybe not a pilot program, but kind of work together to form, so just establish some type of fishery, because it makes sense, but we don't want to impact, you know, you see the next slide and it's pretty daunting, and if fish do come in, you don't want those guys to lose their ability to go fishing too. So we can find some sort of a balance between the small guys, maybe the medium guys, and the large guys, who could all be able to go out and catch them. That'd be great. But not written like this. It's tough. It won't, no one will.
I guess what I would say is, we also can't, balance is absolutely critical, but it's more than just the small scale, the large scale commercial fishery. There's an entire recreational fishery in this bay that exists on this, Connor, this has been in effect for 10, 12, 14 years?
At minimum, yeah.
At minimum. And that whole fishery, it's a small scale charter boat fishery, and that's all based on the current set. So I would encourage the council to be extremely cautious with changing what frankly has been working for 14 years. And I just don't know that there's a need for a change on this. I get that the overall quota has increased, but we haven't had enough menhaden in the bay in the last couple of years, had any fishery to speak of. So I would be very hesitant to, or ask the council to strongly consider that this is clearly not just a commercial focused issue. And as we saw in the e-packet, the amount of interest extends well beyond just rent. For small fish, it gets a lot of attention and interest statewide. So I would guess that we kind of all recognize there's a lot of players at stake.
Yeah, but just to add to that, Greg, I mean, how often is ARC up in the bay and then, you know, there's a line of rec boats buying their fish from ARC? Or,
Oh, but we
The
don't want
cat
to stop
center.
that, right? I don't think no one would want to stop that. We're just trying to say that we wouldn't want to increase. I mean, that's already in effect. So we're not, there's no proposal to ban it. It's just not to expand it. Like, as far as I know, unless I misunderstood something.
There's status quo,
Right.
proposal to clarify, make clarifying changes, proposal to. Dave, did you have extra commentary?
Not really. You know, I want the fishery to be fully utilized and people to make a living. But I understand, it seems like I'm kind of rushing into changes, even though they've been talked about here, they're still concerned over what's being proposed is not being thought through enough. I guess that makes me lean towards, you know, not changing right now.
Any further commentary from council members we have not heard from? No. Okay. We have some competing thoughts on this. So I want to be very intentional with motions. But I can entertain. Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to maintain status quo with the addition of the clarifying language as supported in the state. Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rice. Just for reference, I will not be going to the public on items that were publicly noticed today, unless the council so wishes to do that, but it should be on the matters of nuance. So is there, does this look correct, Mr. President? I recommend the director make sense with the addition of the proposal.
Yeah, the state clarified one. The
Yeah.
department's clarified. Yep.
That's the proposal. Fine. Great. Okay, is there any commentary from, or questions from the council at this moment? Otherwise, I'll go to the division for their perspective. If there's any additional. No, okay. You guys ready for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director to maintain status quo for 2024 for commercial menhaden management with the addition of the proposal one clarifying language, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion passes 6-0. Okay. We're gonna move on to commercial bluefish management.
Thank you. So we have two industry proposals here for commercial bluefish management. Both of them would start the fall season earlier, moving up from November to October. And then they're a little similar in that the first would allow for 10,000 pounds per vessel week. The second would allow for 20,000 per vessel 5 weeks. So basically a 1 week or a 2 week aggregate possession.
Just real quick, Madam Chair, we've had a request from the online participants, if the council members could please speak up, they're having a hard time.
All right, so we gotta talk a lot. No, I think we're all kind of getting quiet. So we can get projecting. No problem. I'll go to the division for perspective.
The division can support either of these. I would just note, I understand the interest in moving them as they are. Just a point of nuance, when we manage quota on these, aggregate levels, we have to then plan, like, we can't change in week or in bi-week, so just, it's an increase in flexibility in terms of planning the fish, which is great. The challenge becomes to modify possession limit, our ability is altered. So in the context of proposal number 2, we would only be eligible to modify the possession limit at the end of the bi-week period, right? So it's increased flexibility to catch the fish, which I think may be important for bluefish, given that time of year, how fast they come in and leave. But with that, comes the idea of that we can't modify position limit as quickly as we can in some of the other, daily or otherwise shorter timescale possession periods. I will also note that we are going to have a significant reduction in bluefish quota. So we anticipate to be able to bring in about what we got last year in terms of quota, but some years we're looking to bring in double our annual quota. But with that reduction, we'll likely only be able to bring in a fraction of that. So just food for thought, we can manage either. And it is likely a good idea to have flexibility, but the only real trade-off between proposal 1 and 2 is our ability to manage it in that fall period. You can't change possession limit as quickly with the bye week, but if 15,000 pounds of fish show up, you may want to, all at once, you may want to fish them before. they're all gone.
Are there any questions or commentary from the council members? Yeah, go ahead.
So did we grossly underutilize the quota last year? This is 20 times.
Yeah, we didn't grossly underutilize our quota. We underutilized the quota plus the transfers we got, if that makes sense. So, I think the idea is just that, like, if the fish show up, I'll take an example of in the first one. So if there's 2,000 pounds of fish that someone intercepts, the idea would not be just, the idea would be to catch them then when they're conceivably in a gill net already there and harvest them before the following period when they probably have left by that point. And thus you don't use the quota. So I think it's more just flexibility than anything else. It is a substantive jump, but we would, at least on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, look to ratchet as necessary to the end. Yeah.
Does the state have any thoughts if it like that's a huge jump? There's been a really strong fall tuna fishery where they seem to be feeding on bluefish the past few years. Is the state of any perspective on if going up to 20,000 pounds might adversely affect the tuna fishery? Like if we clear out that many bluefish, that suddenly, is there any chance, does the state have any thoughts on if that could unintentionally affect another commercial fishery?
Well, I don't know. Conceivably, we're not going to over harvest. We're just gonna fish them
Right, but-
for a time period.
If you clear out 20,000 pounds in a week per boat, like, does the state have any thoughts on if that might affect the tuna fishery? It doesn't seem like that would be a concern.
I don't necessarily think so. I think, because again, it's about how fast you use it, not whether you use it, in my opinion. So if you have the higher possession limit, does that allow you to just utilize the fish when they're here before they're gone? And so quota utilization may be better, but again, we've been pretty good at using the Rhode Island quota, and I guess the concern would probably more be, can we get enough fish transferred here to actually fish the fish we see come through, which we anticipate based on preliminary discussions with the other states regarding who may be looking to transfer fish and whatnot, but But yeah, I think, I think looking at a higher limit is also fine. It shouldn't have I wouldn't think there's an ecosystem level effect from that possession limit. I think in my mind, you may only see 500 pounds anyway coming through. But this just allows the flexibility if a big pulse comes through to get them. And with the modified limits, well, we can react and learn if maybe it exhausts the quota really fast. But October 16th is pretty late, I would say. What's that? Yeah.
So the reason for the 10,000 jump is because when we were last year, May 1 to November, the fish were here, we were underutilizing the quota, and so we actually increased that 6,000 to 8,000 and 10,000. It did go up quite a bit. And we still under harvested because like Connor said, we got some transfers from other states, so we didn't reach the whole quota. We are getting that decrease, but the amount that we landed in 2023, even with the increase in the possession limit, is about equal to what our reduced quota will be this year. So that's why I think the makers of the proposal felt like they could still support a higher limit in that October period. Because there's not a lot of participants who would harvest that amount of fish, but it does allow them that flexibility of the fish are here, they can get them without having to wait the 48 hours for us to adjust the possession limit.
No, that's good. I would hate to have our tuna guys feel like we wiped out their food and fix one problem to create another problem.
Any other further commentary? Otherwise, I can entertain a motion.
I would make a motion just to keep status quo and not go with either of these options, but just stick with the 500.
Well, that sounded, like a question. So is that an actual motion?
That's a motion.
Okay. Recommend status quo, seconded by Mr. D'Angelo.
Sorry.
You both had question marks at the end of that.
Not mentioned.
Okay, is there any other commentary or perspective?
Well, I guess just the one comment is if DEM's got the ability today to increase the, to make utilization of the, make use of the available fish, then I'd like to just stick with 500 and.
So, yeah, so, like in Nicole's example, we can ratchet up. The question is it too late once we've ratcheted? That's the ultimately the question.
Okay. All those in favor of recommending to the director to maintain status quo for 2024 commercial bluefish management, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're gonna move on to scup management.
Okay, so with definition of scup, Mid-Atlantic Fishery Council is requiring a 10% coast-wide reduction of recreational scup harvest in 2024. We are part of the northern region, which is Mass, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York. And the northern region has submitted 3 proposals for review by the TCM board. Proposal 1 increases the size limit to 11 inch for vessel modes of fishing for scup, leaves the season and the possession limits alone, as well as shore fishing for scup. It would achieve a 4% reduction for Rhode Island and 10% for the region. It's also the preferred proposal for the northern region. Proposal 2 would keep the size limits and seasons the same, but reduce the possession limits for each of the periods. It would achieve a 15.7% reduction for Rhode Island and 11.7% for the region. And the final proposal would increase the minimum size for all modes, 11 up to 11 for vessel and 10 from shore. It would open the season earlier on April 1st, but reduce the bag limits in all periods except the bonus period, September, October. It would achieve a 9.2% reduction for Rhode Island and 11.5%.
Any questions from the council before I go to perspective?
The division would strongly support proposal 1. Okay. Just to highlight again, right now, through this reduction, we're working as a region from New York up through Massachusetts. This actually, while it does go up a half an inch, it does allow us to actually take a smaller reduction than we would otherwise be able to. We can go into the math later if you want, but really the important point here is that this actually allows us to achieve the regional goal with the least or with minimal impact as we could possibly do.
So I'll make a motion if we're ready for it,
You guys ready for this? Go ahead.
that we go with, Northern Region proposal number 1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Angela. Is there any further commentary or perspective? You guys ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 1 as noticed for 2024 recreational scup management, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 6. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're gonna move on to summer flounder management, rural recreation.
So for summer flounder recreational management, we are being required to take a 28% reduction in recreational harvest. We have 3 proposals that attempt to achieve that goal. The first 2 would raise the minimum size a half an inch up to 18.5 inch. And depending on the proposal, either start the season a little bit later and extend into the fall, June 4th to September 15th, with a 3 fish per day bag limit. The other proposal would open a little bit earlier, May 24th, but only go into the end of August 26th. Once again, a 3 fish per day bag limit. Proposal 3 increases the size limit all the way up to 19 inches. And it would also eliminate that special shore, well, sorry, it doesn't eliminate. It also leaves special shore alone. But it would also allow for an earlier season start, April 1st, and we could liberalize the bag limit to 6 fish per person per day.
Right. Connie, you want to weigh in with some perspective?
Sure. It's probably followed through the process that there was a lot of support coalesced around proposal 3, which with a large part of that being, even though it's a greater reduction, it allows for extending the fishery earlier into the year, which has become critical for various sectors within the rec community as we look to try and do other types of management strategies like with black sea bass. So this actually allows for the start to be earlier if the fish happen to be around. Much of the conversation in the community was about this 4 versus 6 possession limit presented here. There was concern that maybe 6 would send a mixed message of you increase the minimum, but then you increase the possession limit. This seems counterintuitive, but it's the math, simply put. In terms of just the number of fish you actually see at that size and what could be then harvested. So with that said, the division still supports proposal number 3. There is little if no difference, or actually really no difference in terms of the actual from a conservation side between 4 and 6, but the 6 actually then allows for perhaps a more attractive or enticing possession limit for people to come around and fish. We don't perceive any adverse effects from 4 versus 6, and to mitigate some of the concerns that some of the public has had, we will work to enhance messaging, why that is. But yeah, I don't, a lot of the discussion was coalesced around proposal 3 and whether 4 versus 6 was actually, which was preferable. And I think from the division perspective, we would support proposal 3 as is.
Any commentary or questions from the council? I'll go with Dave first, so I'll go to you second.
So I was just interested in hearing the council members that are from the recreational charter fisheries, their perspective on the comments that Connor brought up about this mismessaging. There was something submitted by Mr. Carl Fiske here that basically mixed message, it's gonna cause people to get frustrated when they do come, because they won't be able to catch those 6 fish, and then will lead to, you know, keeping fish that are undersized to satisfy those people. So, you know, what do you think about that comment?
I think while the semantics, can be a little off and confusing, I think that as long as we meet the proposal and then some with 34%, that's, if we can give something that helps the party boats out and that encourages people, they say, well, yeah, it's a little tougher, but if we have a great day, all recreational fishermen all hope for a dream day. And 6, if anything, gives them more to look forward to, not less. Even if we know the math says 6 fish isn't going to happen very often, you don't want to take away someone's dream. And I think if we can meet the needed reduction and allow the head boats to advertise that you can, on a great day, you can average, and somebody look at jackpot. There'll be somebody somewhere along the season that gets 6. So I guess I would support the change. I do recognize that there's a bit of mixed messaging, but I wouldn't let semantics get in the way of business.
Well, I guess just a quick comment on that for Dave. I mean, I think two things to spin on that and kind of make the point of is we're gonna go to a minimum 18.5 either way. So if we go to 19, you actually get to start the season 2 months earlier and you get to double your bag limit. So those are the kind of 2 selling points that I would, say of that. So, I had a question besides that, but if there's more on Dave's comment.
I just want to say I agree with those 2 guys just said.
Okay, great. Go ahead, give your friends.
I just wanted to confirm, it's still for the special shore, it's still 2 fish at 17?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
got it, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the proposal.
All right, motion to adopt proposal 3, made by Mr. Rice and seconded by Mr. D'Angelo. There seemed to be a lot of interest in this one, so I will offer an opportunity for further comment or questions. If not, I can opportunity for further perspective.
Yeah, no, just all of them meet the goal, and it's proposal 3 overall, I think, allows for meeting the reduction and also overall interest in the best interest of the recreational community.
Cool. Any other for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 3 as noticed for 2024 recreational summer flounder management, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-0 passes unanimously. All right. We are going to go to the possession limit clarification for Finfish.
Sure, so this is a clarifying proposal, which, so in part 3, all of our possession limits are to a per vessel, and they'll state per vessel. And that can bring up some confusion. We want to modify our language to make it clear that all commercial possession limits are for per person and per vessel per day. So just, a person can't go out on one boat and get a possession limit and come back and get another one on another boat. That is what we're clarifying here. There's an example of how the language would look there at the bottom. There are many possession limit rules throughout part 3.
Might I offer this one says per person or per vessel? Is the example still correct with the or versus and?
It's per person or, sorry.
Or per vessel, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure there was no other clarifying points on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the proposal should be person and per vessel.
Great. Any questions or commentary on the matter? Can I entertain a motion?
I mean, I guess just a comment was, I understand talking through what you just said, but I don't know if that's crystal clear to the general public if they read that, but I think I understand the intent. Everybody else has any other thought?
No other thoughts on that matter? I can entertain a motion or question.
It does seem confusing.
Okay, all right, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
It's fine.
because you'd be like, oh, I have two people on my boat.
So what, maybe it might be good to.
Yeah, like if you say per person, we could interpret it as persons on boat, right? No. I know what you mean. You know, it's per vessel, I mean, per person, but
Sorry.
What's an example of, I mean, is there, can you walk us through a specific fishery that has kind of this, that's run into this issue, maybe? Maybe that's where I'm having a hard time following.
Yeah, sure. So an example might be, like in this case, we have a bi-week period. So we have it per person or per vessel per bi-week. So if a vessel goes out with one person on it, it's still, that vessel can only land the possession limit for that bi-week. That person can go out on the vessel, he can only land that possession limit for that bi-week. So if that person jumps on another vessel, he's still being limited by what he already landed on the other boat. Likewise, if the vessel goes out and has a different captain, the vessel is still only allowed to land what it is allowed per bi-week. So basically, there's some confusion that if a boat goes out with a different captain, that it resets the possession limit. That's not the case. We're trying to clarify it there. And then conversely, if a person goes out on a different boat, it does not reset the possession. So I didn't muddy it more.
No, I think I'm okay.
Well done. Any further thoughts? Does that clarify that? Okay. Entertain a motion? Or further questions or clarifications?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
To recommend to adopt village
Begin.
modification.
Recommends to adopt the proposed rule as modified. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Rice.
And just to clarify, the idea is that we noticed as an example, a person or vessel, but it would be and. But John's example still conveys the point. It's just semantics or a clarification in the proposal.
Okay.
So that's how I would interpret your motion here. Yeah.
Okay. Anything further? Ready for the question? Need a one nod. Okay. All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of language for the commercial possession limits with the modification that or should in fact be and. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion passes unanimously. Ooh, that was a tongue twister, guys. All right. We're gonna move on to Jonah Crab dealer requirement.
Sure. So at workshop, the division proposed updating our dealer rule, part 7, to mimic our harvester rule for Jonah crab, which requires only whole crabs to be landed. We proposed having the same language in dealers, that dealers shall only purchase whole Jonah crabs. I will say though, at the workshop, a bunch of concerns came up, particularly about crabs shedding claws. So we are going to withdraw this proposal for now, and bring it back out after we discussed some of the input we had at the workshop and as well as at the hearing. So we are withdrawing this one. Proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, so there's two options. You can either formally vote it down, or maybe even not even vote at all. I'll leave that up to you, but I guess, yeah, we will workshop this more before bringing it back.
Maybe what I'm going to do is offer all those. Yeah. So there's a motion to table made by Mr. McBride. Seconded by Mr. D'Angelo. All those in favor of tabling this item and it gets brought back before the council, please raise your hand. Under the motion passes unanimously. We're going to pull a minute to catch up here. Feedback. That was very. You. And now we're going to move on to electronic tracking requirements for federal lobster permit holders. I would just, like to one more time reiterate that because there's multiple public processes in this, on this particular item, I will not be going out to the public online or in the audience at all, right? Just for council members and the division perspective. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, electronic tracking requirements are being, electronic tracking is being required for federal lobster permit holders, who have, lobster and Jonah crab permits. This is from addendum 29 to amendment 3 of the fishery management plan for lobster. Our proposal is to implement the fishery management plan to be consistent, to implement the rule to be consistent with the fishery management plan. The summary of the rule, it shall be unlawful for the permitted vessel or vessel operator to operate in any manner without an operable approved electronic tracking device installed, or you cannot tamper with the installed device. The electronic tracking device shall be installed and activated prior to beginning a fishing trip with track gear on board. Permit holders shall sign and submit a written affidavit confirming installation prior to initiating a fishing trip with track gear on board. And the electronic tracking device shall remain on board the vessel and powered on when the vessel is in the water. So just a little background here, we have received money to distribute these devices to fishermen, and we've distributed most of them, I'd say over 85%, if not 90%. Next slide, please. I will say that both the workshop and the public hearing, and it's reflected in the comments as well, I was asked to reiterate that all of the comments are in strong opposition to a VMS requirement. And some of the concerns there are the requirement to have the unit powered on at all times is being considered an invasion of privacy and might drain the vessel battery, causing issues like bilge pumps to fail. Other concerns were that the VMS units required for other federal fisheries aren't accepted here. Boats would have to get an additional VMS to be in compliance. There were questions about who would have access to this VMS data. And the overall consensus was that the DMF should not adopt this requirement.
I might just offer to do some division perspective first. I know this is a pretty heavy topic, so maybe get some extra perspective from the division. Okay.
Thanks, I'm sure with every FMP requirement that's part of the ASMFC, the division supports looking to adopt that, to be remain in compliance with the FMP. Rhode Island was one of the several states that voted in support of this at the ASMFC over a year ago. The rule itself was supposed to be enacted December 15th. Personally, I felt that I didn't want to break the rule last fall because I wanted to ensure that we got everybody the ability to get a unit with service before actually formulating the rule. And given that the fishery at that time of year was slower, we are now bringing this forth now for folks that have tried to buy extra time of not having needing it on the boat per our state regulation. But as not having this in regulation, we are out of compliance with the FMP. You all probably saw in your e-packet the letter from Executive Director Bob Beal from the ASMFC to us saying that we are currently out of compliance, and if we don't move to put this in regulation, we will be, found out of compliance. There's been questions regarding what that actually means, being found out of compliance. So the process would be that if you all recommend to not adopt it and the director does not adopt it, as a result, ASMFC as a board could vote to find us then out of compliance, and with that message then going to the Secretary of Commerce to indicate that we are not in compliance with the fisheries management plan for lobster, and depending on their feeling on the matter, they could also find us out of compliance and then prohibit possession of American lobster commercially, both for state and federal commercial harvesters of Rhode Island. It does not extend to other species, but it does extend to both state and federal water lobster fisheries for Rhode Island. So that is a legitimate possible outcome if we are found out of compliance with ASFFC. And so most times when that happens, when states are found out of compliance, they move swiftly to rectify it. So right now, the commission has notified us that we will be found out, we could be found out of compliance by then if we don't look to move this to regulation, which is why not only Maine and Massachusetts have done so, but the other states who operate in the lobster fishery are currently looking to put the same regulations on their books. And so that ultimately is the interaction with the federal component, as the commission would respond then to the Secretary of Commerce when we are out of compliance. I thought I would just quickly walk through some of these, because I think some of them I wanted to just clarify based on the public hearing as well as the workshop. So I guess the right now, I'll just kind of pick a couple of them. So who will have access to data? There isn't anybody accessing the data as we speak. There's a lot of discussion that's going on right now regarding how do we clean the data, how do we remove tracks or pings or information that's not reflective of active fishing. How do we build coast-wide data products that allow for anonymity and following the rules of three, but also provide an accurate representation of where federal lobster fishery is taking place. So that none of that data is being issued at this time, but we are now coast-wide looking to get this data on the books so we have it as we need moving forward for various elements. The largest discussion at the ASMFC board for this was trying to get, for the first time, fine scale data to understand where the federal lobster fishery is taking place, to make sure that when we're in these various discussions around spatial management or spatial fisheries management, we can make decisions to help the fishery, not against the fishery, understand where they fish, and we can look to do so. And I understand that there's a large discussion or feeling that a lot of those issues in Southern New England have come and gone. I would argue that you don't know what the next issue is going to be for us to deal with. And there's other issues that will continue throughout the region for us, and thus the spatial data is imperative. And so with that, there are concerns that we've looked to try and bring forth to the idea of, the interest is trying to figure out where fishing is actively taking place, not necessarily where someone's taking their boat on a day not fishing or in transit. And so what we've done as a division is brought forth these concerns to our board, the board members for ASMFC on the lobster management board, and conveying to them that, we need to be looking towards technologies and permitted devices and such, in addition to what's already available, that allows for more nimbleness or swiftness in trying to actually have devices turn on and off when fishing is actively taking place, such as, could a unit be triggered by a pot hauler? And that way we would actually know where the fishing is taking place as opposed to a transit. So again, this was an FMP requirement that was looking for us to try and get this rule adopted by December 15th. And thus we're currently out of compliance, and as we're looking, like with many of our ASMFC compact FMP requirements, we're looking to do the same with this.
Are there any, let's start with questions first to Connor for law enforcement.
Connor, I have a question about the other states. It's not the last state to enact this. Where's the status from the other states that they were in the process?
Massachusetts enacted this last May for their fishery. So they decided the opposite approach and put it on the books before it was actually required, before the December 15th date. Maine, I believe, aligned with the December 15th. So those states both have these regulations on their books now. So they are not found out of compliance. New Hampshire, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, I believe are all holding their equivalent of this forum from April through May. So they are looking to, or maybe they've already occurred, I'm not sure the timing of each of those states, but Rhode Island's not unique in being held to this. Just that we're, again, I thought it would be better to make sure if we were going to have this on the books, that we waited to make sure we actually had ample opportunity to get our federally permitted federal permit holders devices with paid service time before making it required for regulation. You know, and I think we've talked about this before as a group, you know, in terms of the units, obviously, you know, there's strong opposition, as you saw from you either heard from the workshop or saw from the e-packet from the hearing. The VMS itself is a unit that we require for our aggregate programs for fluke and sea bass, and it's something that would also be eligible. So any lobster permit holder who had that the same unit would qualify for that program if they so chose to partake in it.
Is it appropriate to ask questions about the amendment itself, or is that kind of already a done deal? And we're not gonna change that aspect of it here, so why talk about it?
Well, the amendment, you're welcome to ask any question about the amendment. The amendment's not going to change based on your deliberation or your vote, but if you have questions on why the amendment took place, or, you know, what the overall comments from the amendment were, like, I'm happy to do my best to answer any of those.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with that first one. I don't want to just belabor the point, but, you know, the lawsuit from the fishermen in Maine states that this was started with an amendment to deal with whales, and that now that the Consolidated Appropriations Act has been passed, this amendment is in conflict with that. So do you agree with that, the amendment that put this in place? You know, it's not really about stock assessment. I think it's pretty weak. That justification is about trying to develop spatial management for whales in the future.
I guess I would disagree that, well, I have not read the main lawsuit in totality, so I can't speak to what it says, but there were 4 major reasons for why, per the FMP spatial data would be helpful. One is stock assessment, particularly understanding what the fleets are, and there's elements of the modeling that requires knowing what selectivity parameters should be based on the stock itself, and is some of the stat areas don't align with lobster management areas. It's sometimes challenging to actually model that. So we've been often interested in areas, for example, like 537. You know, where is the lobster fishery taking place, and has that shifted, and does that change our selectivity parameterization in the model? So there are some elements of which you can support stock assessment by knowing the spatial data. From the spatial management, I think the data itself is valuable for that. The argument of whether the data, it's too late to be collected for major issues, I think I could see how that perception could stand in southern New England, but certainly not in Gulf of Maine, Georges Bank, and some of the Mid Atlantic areas where lobster fishery is taking place. And again, it's hard to know whether the next thing be offshore aquaculture or, you know, mineral mining. Like, there's just different things that happen in the offshore areas that the spatial data could be used for. A good example is the northern edge right now. That's being discussed by the New England Council to try and understand where the lobster fishery is taking place. And so there's these issues that come up that the data will prove to be useful for, in my opinion. I think that the reason that this is going forth is not tied to the Consolidated Appropriations Act or that whale legislation. In my mind, the whole point of that was to delay, to try and collect better data before taking actions against further spatial closures and other directed right whale management actions. So in my mind, the data collection from this would actually aid in some of the future discussions that are going forward with that as opposed to in conflict with the Appropriations Act or the 6-year more pause on further right whale action. And I think there is an element of this that's useful for enforcement, not necessarily in a real time. But certainly when trying to understand if there's fishing happening in closed areas or, how people are fishing via various boats and permits, I think there is utility in that. It's not going to be real time, but it's similar to our other VMS programs. It could be information used to try and understand whether there is a repeated violation that that enforcement would like to look into further. And again, I don't think we're at a place necessarily where that either as a state or as a community on the fisheries management side where we're ready to use that data in that fashion yet, between QAQC, matching tracks with BTRs, identifying active fishing versus transiting locations. So we're a good ways away from that, but I still think the utility is valuable in that framework. So those were kind of the 4 major elements of which the addendum identifies as why the collection of this data is important. And at the board level, the motion that was put forth was echoed by the fact that it's looking to try to better understand where fish is occurring, to gain better data as needed for these different assessments, but also, be able to get out front and say, this is where fishing's happening. We need to be thoughtful about these areas, as opposed to not having the information to verify it. That was the main discussion that the board had when taking final action. Sorry if that was too much.
No, I'll do the last question.
Is there any other questions? Maybe I'll offer opportunity, Greg, go ahead.
Oh, just could you go back one slide? So at the bottom, there's the one comment about the tracking device should be activated prior to beginning a trip with track gear on board. That kind of makes sense to me, but then it goes down, show the vessels to remain on board and powered when the vessel is in the water. Did we clarify, like literally if somebody's on the hook or at a dock, does it have to still be on?
It should be, yeah. Yes, it should be, and it's similar with other VMS units. We did try and chat with some of the manufacturers and really get a sense of, if that's on, what is the actual drainage of battery that would be for the device, and would that pose a problem for the boats more tied to the dock? The overall consensus from and not to mitigate the concern of industry,
Right.
but from the manufacturer's perspective, that drawdown is minimal or negligible to the battery, but
I guess I was thinking more in terms, so even if track gear is not on board, like we do have some boats here in Rhode Island that don't exclusively fish for lobsters. The expectation would be that thing would still be on, even if they didn't have any track gear on board the boat.
yeah, I think the expectation is that it would be on, like in a given year, your first day of fishing that year till the last day of fishing that year at a minimum, as I understand it. And we would, in terms of identifying the identification of the tracks and locations by day that are associated with the lobster fishery would be tied to looking at the BTRs and see what was, actually landing sail to location.
Right, all right. I know I'm out of my lane with commercial stuff, but it just seems like if you drop that bottom, like the rest of it makes total sense to me. Just that bottom one, the struggle with.
Yeah, this is all from the FMP.
Right.
So, but I mean,
I get we would still potentially be out of compliance with that, but it seems like it's splitting hairs.
what we can, I think these are things that we'll have to continue to work on at the board level as a modification. Additionally, like, again, as new devices become available that are more efficient, draw less power, cheaper. Allow for easier activation associated with effort, those are all things that we will push forward at a higher level. Because that list of vendors and rules will come up periodically, so it's not quite set in stone in terms of the devices themselves that are permitted.
I think there's a question. Okay. Is there any other commentary?
Yeah, I have a comment, I guess, not, putting the validity of the amendment aside, I think that, I'm not really in favor of adopting this right now. I think what's going on here politically has shifted a bit since it was passed. So Rhode Island's not the last state to implement this. So there's other states right now that are technically out of compliance. We don't know how they'll end up in the next few months, so maybe there's a group of states out of compliance. So after Atlantic States, has a long way to go before we get thrown out of the lobster crab fishery. And what's happening now is that literally all of the comments echo the state of Maine's lawsuit that's being sued against them. It's violation of their Fourth Amendment rights, unreasonable search and seizure, and violation of the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And we know that the lobstermen already tried to sue the state for return from Rhode Island, but couldn't because the rule wasn't passed yet. So as soon as you pass this rule, they're gonna get sued in the exact same suit in Maine. So why don't you delay and wait and see, what happened with that lawsuit in Maine to set a precedent for what's gonna happen to Rhode Island? In the meantime, if it does come to a head where you have to get comply or thrown out of the fishery, maybe you'll get cooperation or some support from the lobstermen for that. They'll recognize that the division tried to delay and stop. And, it wasn't just kind of a dog and pony show here that had to go through this process. But no matter what, Rhode Island's gonna implement this. So that's where I stand. I stand in favor of status quo and seeing how things unfold the next few months.
Is there any further comments? I will entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to, for status quo for. Can I do status quo for the lobster rules?
Yes. So you would do status quo for lobster, the regulations.
Or conversely, you can say just do not adopt.
Do not adopt. I think that would actually.
Right, so I would make a proposal to not adopt proposal one, division proposal.
Seconded by Katie Egan. Sorry. Is there any further commentary on this, or would you be ready for the question? Go ahead.
Probably for Connor, but I guess has Rhode Island or any other state kind of pushed back at the ASMFC level like this and been found out of compliance for other fisheries? And if so, what was the result?
Yes. Of the 3 or 4 examples that I know of, the commission found the state out of compliance and went to the Secretary of Commerce conveying such. Of the recent ones, only one I can remember that was met with mixed results from the Secretary of Commerce in terms of whether they wanted to stand pat. That was, I think, some Flounder in New Jersey, but Menhaden in Virginia and a number of states have been found out of compliance, and when they did, they swiftly moved to go back into compliance. So, I mean, quite frankly, for your vote tonight, the question is, to what degree you want to risk closing the lobster fishery down in Rhode Island? Like, that's what it comes down to. And that's a recommendation of the director. So, they can, if the director then accepts that. So that's what it comes, I can't tell you what the Secretary of Commerce will say. But that would be, if this motion or if this vote were to be adopted and promulgated or not, as a result, that would be that would be the ramification of count at the commission level. Not only us explaining why, but, you know, we would be found, it would likely be that the commission then reports to the Secretary of Commerce that we are not in compliance with fishery management plan.
I could add just a touch with New Jersey, it's that was the summer flounder, like Connor said. Well, so when you go to the Secretary of Commerce to be found guilty, is I guess the wrong word, out of compliance, there has to be shown a commercial or monetary loss that it caused the problem. They didn't, but New Jersey kind of sort of won for that year, but the next year they weren't ready for compliance. So it was almost like a protest. From my view anyway, with New Jersey, they won, but the next year they went right into compliance, so.
So in this case, I see it similar where you just want to see what happens to the lawsuit in Maine. Right, you want more time, why should we, when it's the same exact lawsuit is gonna be filed against the state of Rhode Island, not exact, but the same three tenants. So, you know, let's wait a little, make a protest, wait and see how that turns out, and if the fishermen in Maine win, I think that changes everything.
Yeah.
I get the difference is that Maine and Massachusetts are in compliance and can operate in the federal lobster and state lobster fisheries for American lobster. Regardless of a lawsuit, they're allowed to continue to do that. Conceivably, if we did not do this and it worked its way through the chains, us and any other states not having it on the books could be found out of compliance and thus be removed from the lobster fishery. So yes, at some point, Maine or Massachusetts or whomever gets sued may be forced to repeal their regulation, at which point then they would be found out of compliance in concept with ASMFC and thus could be removed from the lobster fishery. So I think I guess depending, which challenge, I guess, would you want to face, assuming that Rhode Island faces a lawsuit in an effort to try and be in compliance with the FMP. But I guess it's just, I see those as two different things.
It's not, there's time to react if that chain of events starts to happen. Not the secretary can snap the fingers and you're out of compliance. There's a chance for Rhode Island to comply, right?
On what time scale? I mean, this is us trying to comply. We won't put an emergency rule through to comply because we're trying to do that here in an open process to get comments. And even if we put an emergency rule through, it could be challenged in and of itself and bring it before the council. So, you know, the way I look at it is that we've been out of compliance for 5 months. And this is us to try and move into compliance as other states have. And whether we are found out of compliance or whether we are sued and whether that lawsuit indicates that there's something intrinsically wrong with the FMP requirements, and we would cross that bridge when we get to it. But in terms of marine fisheries, not from a lawsuit perspective, just like with every other interstate fisheries management plan, some of the ones you saw tonight, we're looking to try to maintain our compliance, for the benefits that we talked about with the data, but really to be able to maintain active status in the fishery. But again, there's a process. I can't tell you timelines or how people will respond, but that's effectively, you know, what would happen. And I can't also, you know, you're providing a recommendation of the director. So there's nested elements throughout this. Sorry.
And we voted in favor of this at the ASFC level, correct? We did.
Correct.
So we believed it was in the best interest of at the time, we believed, despite that it's not perfect, that we believed it was in the best interest of our lobstermen.
Correct, and the resource, itself. I mean, these concerns were echoed there as well, and I must, you know, so that message is still maintained. The other element that was voiced was at the time, we did not have a plan of which to get harvesters devices in airtime, and through through federal action, we've been able to secure funds and get those devices out to people in an effort to meet these requirements. So I guess that would be the one element that's, as a region, we've responded to based on the comments that we received at during the ASMFC hearing and board voting process.
Everyone ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director to not adopt proposal 1 as noticed for electronic tracking requirements for federal lobster permit holders, please raise your hand. 2 in favor, all those opposed. 4 opposed, the motion fails. So we are back to the drawing board, as you would say.
Madam Chair, like to make a motion that recommended to the director to adopt the proposal with the stipulation that that the division and the Rhode Island commissioners work with the FMC about adoption of technology that safeguards user privacy and to operate only during active fishing.
So Mr. Rice makes a motion to adopt proposal 1, but with the stipulation of the division.
That the Rhode Island commissioners, there's the division, there's the legislative and the governor's appointees work with the AFMFC to encourage greater technology development toward active fishing,
Protecting privacy.
protecting while active fishing.
Let's take a look at that. Do I have a second for that, or do we want to, let's take a look at it, where Greg, that's me.
I mean, see how it looks. But
Yeah,
Sorry, that was privacy data, and is it also the keeping on at all times?
Yeah, keeping on while actively fishing.
as opposed to.
take a look at this. Adoption of proposal as noticed, electronic. With the commission of DMF and board members to engage ASMSA to encourage lobster data. And the devices are only required to be powered on to activate. Does that accurately reflect your motion? You did mention, I just want to note, so I want to make sure you did say the governor and the legislature as well, but I just.
Those are the 3 members of the. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that's correct.
That's the board members.
Yep. Greg, do you have any commentary?
Yeah. No.
Okay, but are you seconding? Okay. Is there any commentary on this matter before us?
What is an example of how you can ensure this? Like, can you expand on what assurances these guys would have? I mean, we had not one comment in support of adopting this, so I'd hate to put our voice in their place when we're not representing everyone but hearing from the industry.
Well, essentially, the rationale behind this is that we're caught between a rock and a hard place. We definitely don't want to be caught out of compliance and basically putting the lobster fishery in jeopardy for the state. That would be catastrophic. That would set things in motion. What this basically does is that it basically makes it clear, basically all commissioners go back and fully put on the table that privacy concerns are a key concern in Rhode Island. And in actuality, the data, if properly properly put together, are really of interest while that boat is actively fishing. So to basically give incentive to develop the commercial technology to do it properly and protect privacy rights. And it's basically giving marching orders to our 3 commissioners.
I'm just concerned that this will be interpreted as a recommendation to go right ahead, and none of this will happen, and I can't support something like that. It just seems, and seems they've spoken, they don't want it. They know the consequences. It's concerning. Bringing this to a vote is, I think it would just send the wrong message if we approve this, and not, not what we've been hearing from the industry.
I'll add, I appreciate the sentiment. Doesn't that second line make it out of compliance anyways? If you did try and do that, that's kind of what Greg was talking about at the beginning, that last bullet. So if you are powered on all the time, then it's out of compliance anyway. So they can't really do that, and they should be doing the privacy part anyways. So it doesn't really move the needle for me. And I just want to go back to Connor, like I don't understand why the state wouldn't do an emergency action to save the lobster fishery if it did come to that. Like, it's like, oh, we already tried and we said no, so too bad. That kind of seems like, not right.
I should say that we do direct final rule and emergency actions from time to time. We did an emergency action last year for striped bass. We could do that, but I think, first off, it continues out of compliance. So whatever that, like, we could punt and risk getting the lobster fishery closed. If we direct final rule it, that basically circumvents this process here. And but if anybody challenges it, then we would have to then go and come back through this process. So it delays ultimately what we're doing here. The emergency rule is tied to governor discretion. So conceivably, the governor could say, yes, move forward, but this is in regulation as managed by the director right now. So how the governor moves forward or not in an emergency action, I would hope, but I can't speak to how fast the state as at large would respond to that. So, like, there's a number of ways to do it, but right now we are out of compliance.
But it's not the last bite at the apple. If it did come down to, hey, you're booted out of the fishery if you don't get it. Well, we're trying to emphasize.
And yeah, I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is I can't tell you, we are out of compliance currently right now. And at some point, if we continue this, not in the short term, but in some amount of time, not in the long term, like some near future, the commission will vote to say Brown's out of compliance and ask the Secretary of Commerce to make a final rule, either telling us to get in compliance right away or recommend removing us from the lobster fishery. Again, as noted, I've seen several different paths of which this is unfolded for various species. New Jersey had it almost with striped bass last season too. Virginia, Maryland, or Virginia and Menhaden. So, you know, I don't know, that's my perspective. However you would like to recommend, whatever you like to recommend the director, that's ultimately up to you, but those are the risks.
Okay, any further statements or questions? You ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 1 as noticed for electronic tracking requirements for federal lobster permit holders with the condition that the division work with ASMFC lobster board members to engage ASMFC to ensure privacy of lobster data, and that the devices are only required to be powered on while actively fishing. Please raise your hand if you are in favor. 1, 2, 3. In favor. All those opposed? 2 opposed? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay, so
Well, make sure we have those names right. Can you say them out loud, then we'll have
Yep.
that date.
So all those in favor, one more time, if you voted in favor, it was Mr. D'Angelo, Mr. Vespi, and Mr. Rice. All those opposed?
Sorry, no.
No,
In favor, Mr.
Not
Vespi,
D'Angelo,
Mr.
I'm
Barrow.
sorry, Barrow. Mr. Barrow. Sorry. All those opposed would be Mr. Bethany and Ms. Egan, and then all those abstaining would be Mr. D'Angelo. Yeah. Your last name is messed up, I'm so sorry. Okay, so what I might offer is that these 2 votes, 3 to 3 to split. I will not break a vote.
Let's just continue.
So it's 3 in favor, 2 opposed, 1 abstention, but it's
Yeah,
Trust me.
so this is as close as we can get to a tie vote. As chair and as somebody who also works for the department, I do not feel it is in the best interest for me to be breaking this vote, and there is nothing in the regulations requiring me to break this vote. I think this vote and the prior vote actually reflect the general sentiment of the voting members of the council, and these are the 2 decisions to go before the director. Is there any legal challenge to that? Is there any reason that we should have another vote on any other matters? Okay, now that I've consulted Mr. Lobianco, that is the decision for this item. There are no other items on this, the publicly noticed matters. Are there any other public matters before us tonight? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to mention that this is my last meeting, and I've been sort of enjoyed 2 full terms plus a partial term, so it's kind of time to get my boot here. My replacement has been considered, and he is in the audience here. She is Dr. Melba Trevino Pena, and her area of expertise is in fisheries anthropology. She is in my department, and the idea of having social scientists within sort of the academic community is quite cutting edge. It's usually stock dynamics person and the like. And since fisheries are indeed a very human affair, hopefully Melba will bring her sort of cutting edge vibes to this body. Well, so thank you, Melba, for stepping in.
Thank you so much, Mr. Doctor, for your years of service.
Yeah, thank you.
It's incredibly, it's good. It's bittersweet. And then I think we also have a following retirement from Mr. Barrow.
Yep.
Who is also retiring from the council. This is his last meeting as well. So we will be seeing two of our members that I started with a year ago leave. So thank you so for your years of service.
Sure, yeah, I just want to say, thanks to Nicole probably for keeping us going during COVID, because that was definitely a challenge, so thanks for that.
Thank you both so much. With no other items, I will also offer, we are in the process of being or recommending to the governor 2 additional members to the council, and then a third should Ms. Melba join us as well. But we have 2 additional members joining us. We have Jasper Cotu, who is in the middle of getting confirmed by the governor, and we also have Patrick Duckworth in the same process. So we will be seeing their faces up here, arduously going through these things as well. So welcome aboard. With that, is there any objection to adjourning? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.